Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. So the other day I was scrolling YouTube and came across this post from MMA On Point. You can see it on screen here. Real simple question: do you enjoy watching UFC like you used to? And I know my answer. It's definitely not A. It's closer to B or C. And I'm someone who's been watching UFC all the way back since UFC number one. I don't know, 10 years old, something like that, and made a big impression on me. I've been a fan ever since. And I got to say that as of late, I don't really care much about the UFC. They're building up a lot of controversy, obviously, with this whole White House fight that's coming up in about a week. But really, the thing here that caught my attention was as I saw this post and I started scrolling through the comments to see what other people were feeling, I thought it was kind of interesting. I'm just going to go in blind. Honestly, it's been a couple of days since I looked at this. So we can kind of get into what people are feeling about the UFC lately. Uh, it's like eating at your formerly favorite restaurant that got bought out by private equity. I don't know about that. It's not exactly like eating at a restaurant for me, but somehow that's the top comment here. This is how I feel. I used to watch every card, even fight night cards. Now I'm occasionally watching. I think the big problem is that they started putting fights out basically every week since they moved to Paramount Plus, which on paper sounds like a great idea, but in reality, it's kind of overkill. The problem is you can't really make interesting fights when you've got 10, 12 fights on a card every week that you got to put out there. And there's only so many superstars, right? There's only so many people that we really care about. Obviously, there's a big McGregor fight coming up. McGregor's a big draw. He's fighting Max Holloway again for some reason, but it'll obviously get a big draw. And the fact that it's on Paramount is nice, right? We don't have to pay the pay-per-view fees anymore. You'd think we'd be getting more viewers with that, but for me personally, I have technical issues every time I try to log in to Paramount. So I haven't been watching it as much. I usually watch it on my phone after the fight has happened so I can fast forward through the boring parts. I will say Paramount's done some cool stuff where they have a 60-minute version of the night and you can kind of just see all of the highlights. They edit it for you so you don't have to fast forward through all the boring parts. This guy's been watching since 2001. He feels kind of like me, doesn't really care since last summer. And again, now it's on a subscription thing where you pay $10 a month and you get all the fights. You'd think I was stoked when I heard it was going to Paramount. I've really fallen off like a lot of these people. Can't explain the passion I had from 2021 to 24. I watch back and go, all those fights. Now we don't care. We sleep through the main events. What else do we got here? Peak MMA back in 2010. We don't really have the attention span like we used to. So if I'm going to sit there and watch a 25-minute championship fight or a main event fight, and it's a couple of people I don't really know all that well, I'm probably not going to be able to sit through that. I'm going to fast forward through a bunch of it. The Reebok deal, yeah, and so a lot of things too, right, with me, when the UFC was on pay-per-view, I had a really hard time paying for those events because of all of the commentary we've been getting around fighter pay and how the UFC doesn't really take care of their fighters. They've got one of the lowest athlete percentages of all of the major sports. And, these guys are risking their lives out there. They're out there getting their punched in the face, broken noses, broken bones, life-altering injuries. Think of Conor McGregor when he snapped his leg and was out for years. McGregor, I think, is the exception when it comes to paying their fighters. But, for the most part, like Francis Ngannou, made more money in his first fight out of the UFC than he made in the entire time he was there. And now we've got Sean Strickland coming out and saying you make more money working at Walmart than you do fighting in the UFC. It's kind of embarrassing. And so as a fan, it's hard to support an organization that doesn't take care of its athletes. And the Reebok deal is a great point because when they passed that Reebok deal, that meant that the fighters could no longer get their own sponsors. You remember that fighters would always have their flag sort of behind them with all of their sponsors, and they could make some additional income. Now they can't do that anymore. They've lost that whole income. What's crazy is, every time I do turn into the UFC, I see More and more advertisements. I turned into the Bilal Muhammad fight for a little bit tonight, and every inch of that octagon has an advertisement in it somewhere. They're on the posts, they're on the top of the cage. Now it's called the Meta Apex Arena. So Facebook has gotten involved and they're sponsoring these things. So there is a ton of money in this. It's a publicly traded company. It's owned by the same company that owns WWE. They've got billions. They're spending $60 million on this White House event, of which they expect to lose $30 million. They're losing $30 million to put on this event. I bet those fighters would love a little piece of that lost money. So if they can afford to lose $30 million on one event, I think they could probably afford to pay their fighters, I don't know, maybe $1 million or $2 million, at least the main headliners. Obviously, we don't know what they're getting paid, but from what we've heard in the reports, it's nothing close to that unless you're a top guy and can really move the needle, of which there just aren't that many anymore. Watered down. It's kind of like how I felt earlier, right? With the fights happening every week, you don't have the same. When you have a fight once a month, you really curate those cards, and they really would work hard to make sure that the matchmakers used to be great at putting these guys together and putting these cards together that you'd want to watch. And even if you didn't know the fighters, you knew that there was a pretty good chance of seeing some good fights that night. And now it's just every card really feels kind of just average, just not that exciting. I would say the White House card, they've got some really great fighters on there. It seems like it's going to be a great card, but with all of the other stuff tied to it, I can't say I'm that excited about it. It feels kind of like not a big time to be celebrating. Obviously, our 250th anniversary of America, and we've got a president who thinks it's all about his birthday. So, yeah, I can't say I'm a big fan of that. Yeah, I enjoyed the MVP card more than the recent UFC cards. Yeah, so the most exciting card lately, the card that I can remember that I was most excited about, was the fight that was on Netflix that wasn't a UFC event, that had Ronda Rousey coming back against Gina Carano. That fight was kind of a joke. As someone, I've seen Ronda Rousey fight in person a couple of times, and one of the fights I went to, it was the one that lasted like about as long as that Carano fight. I can't remember who she fought that night, but it was I can't think, but the girl charged her, tried to throw a flying knee, and Ronda basically just grabbed her, ripped her arm off, and the fight was over before it even started. But I was excited to watch that. I was excited to see her come back. I was excited to see the Mike Perry fight. That was a fun one. It was better than I thought it was going to be, honestly. And obviously Ngannou is a draw. So, they did a great job of putting some great names together that people care about. And I think all those fighters probably got paid more than the UFC fighters do for that one event. And this person saying it here, UFC is failing to put together the biggest fights. And so this is the theme basically that I saw. A lot of these people are saying, I've been a hardcore fan since 2005. It was peak in 2018. So these are longtime fans, people that have been watching since they were 7 years old, kind of like me. I saw the very first UFC ever, and it kind of blew my mind. I remember that guy getting his tooth kicked through the ring, the octagon, in the very first fight, and I was hooked. I'm not hooked anymore. I really don't find it that interesting. Yeah, so this person used to watch every fight until around February. It felt like a shift, and now they really feels like the company doesn't care anymore. And I can kind of agree to that. The company just doesn't really seem to care about anything other than profit anymore. It doesn't seem to care about whether or not the fans actually care. They just want to get more sponsors. I don't need to read all of these, but I'm not seeing anyone. Actually, I haven't seen one person. There's one. Oh, there we go. Right on time. Terrible Toupee 666. He loves it. And so does 440 Fisherman Rock 8. He loves it even more. So good for these guys. They're having a good time. But it seems like most of us are kind of in the middle. We don't really care. Lifelong martial artists, trained all the time. I keep watching. Transformative. Wow, this guy put quite a post together. He's basically saying you may get 5 good fights and 9 dogs or 7 dogs. Yeah, gone are the days where almost every fight was a toss-up. I agree. The cards used to be good when they weren't feeling like they had to put a fight out every week. Don't think I've watched an event in the past year, consistently since the early 2000s. That's 25 years, people. 25-year fan. hasn't watched a single event in the last year. So it seems like, from a fan perspective, UFC is really kind of going down in flames. I'm surprised that I'm not really seeing anything about the White House fight other than Dana White highly politicizing it all. I think that is probably part of the reason why people aren't really as stoked about it anymore, right? I feel like they edited this. I feel like someone's gone in here and maybe stripped out some of the White House comments, which is kind of interesting to me, kind of scary to me if you think about it, about what's been going on lately. But this guy, we'll leave it with this. This guy's going with D as in dog poop. Again, another one. Used to watch every event religiously. Haven't been able to watch it last couple of years. I was honestly watching it up through the end of before it switched over to Paramount. I was still, trying to find those cards. I can tell you, I wasn't really trying to pay for them most of the time. And again, for me, it wasn't because I didn't feel like paying. It was kind of because I felt like I didn't like paying for something where I knew that my money wasn't necessarily going to the fighter. So I'm not there to pay $70-$80 to watch a fight knowing that 95% of that is going to TKO. So yeah, I just thought it was kind of interesting that just about everybody, it feels like, is in the same boat as me. A lot of people aren't that stoked, but there are a couple of good cards coming up, so hopefully we will get some better fights. But even as I may be excited to see McGregor fight again, it's been a long time. It's clearly past his prime. His last two fights weren't that exciting. Max Holloway's had some good fights in the past couple of years, but he's also, towards the end of his career. It's not like these guys are in their prime anymore. I love watching Gaethje fight. I love watching Pereira fight. Pereira, I don't know how to say it. Shama. But, there's just not too many of these guys to go around. So, what do you think? Are you still watching UFC? Are you still into it like you used to be? Do you still enjoy the fights? Do you still want to pay $5,000 to go sit up front somewhere? That's the other thing too about this event at the White House is they've got 1,000 tickets. Trump's got 1,000 tickets. Dana White's got 200, and no one wants to show up. I don't know if you saw the recent articles, but they've invited a bunch of celebrities to show up to this thing, and from what I'm hearing, other than maybe Lee Greenwood, no one really wants to be a part of this. No one wants to be associated with this. Jaden Q21 remains a big fan. So at least there's still about three people out there that are still enjoying the UFC like they used to. But let me know your thoughts in the comment.